Okay, okay. Minutes. No, just kidding. Okay, ready, Steve. Testing 1 2 1 2. Hey hey 1 2. Testing 1 2 3 4. Hey 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 1 2. Yeah, everybody good? All right, that's good. We're good.
Ano ai ke aloha ya kākou. Thank you for joining us today. We are here to provide you with the latest information and updates regarding the Maui wildfires. As many of you are well aware at this point, we are the state of aloha. So we ask kindly that you please operate under the value of aloha, which is extending respect and kindness to each other. Questions and answers from the media will promptly follow the conclusion of the speaker's remarks. Without further ado, I would like to invite Governor Josh Green to address everyone today.
Aloha, everyone. Good to see you all. Just a couple basic overview points from me, and then we're going to dive into our experts who span government, private sector, public sector. It's going to be hopefully very helpful. So I'm here to tell you here on day 44, our hearts are still broken. They still are broken 97 times over. 97 people have been lost, and 80 individuals have been identified, and there are 23 open investigations still, or active investigations by the Maui police. So I wanted to share that with you. That's where we still are today. And we're going to talk more today about how we recover, how we move forward into this next phase of the recovery. So we're going to pop over to the next slide here in a second. Okay, there is a lot to do. One thing is to build a school. So we're going to construct a replacement site, a replacement school for King Kamehameha III's law school, the elementary school. We'll have details for you on 9/26, a press conference over in Lahaina. I have authorized resources, and you'll get all the details about that. I think it's central to healing to have education for our keiki. So we are in discussions with, of course, the DOE, the head of the board, the community. We have to do that. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about how we deal with what we've lost. We've had a lot of asks for support. You can see this number here. 15,931 individuals have registered with FEMA. It's a big number. That's even larger than the universe of people displaced because, as you know, a lot of people who even were outside of the impact zone were affected by lost business, lost ability to get to their house, and so on. So that's pretty important. Also, we're going to provide a lot of support for those to reconstruct their lands. As of this morning, we had gotten through just about half of the 1,500 parcels that were impacted in the impact zone, just about 700. They will begin to allow people to go on Monday back into their properties. And it's going to be a slow process. It's going to be very carefully done because a lot of the ground there is has ash throughout. A lot of the ash is felt to be fairly toxic. So they're probably going to ask people to don protective gear, just so people are aware. And it's going to be a very emotional time. We're going to have support staff there. We're going to have emotional counselors and so on as people go through. So that's an important thing. Also, in addition to that, we've worked with the Hawaii Army Corps of Engineers on a contract. First, it's FEMA, as you know, first it's EPA, as you know, for 3 months to clean out the toxins, and then 9 months from the Army Corps of Engineers. That contract is going to be a big one. It'll be somewhere between $1.2 billion and $1.5 billion, keeping in mind that the federal government's already authorized a 90-10 split with us. They'll pay at least 90%. And we're hopeful, if we do have large costs, that they'll ultimately pay 100%. We'll lean on our congressional delegation for that extra 10%. So that's important. One other thing here is rental assistance available through FEMA. We're going to talk in much greater detail about that through our partnerships. People are not going to be displaced from hotels into a homeless state. We have the guarantees that we can get up to 18 months of support. It's a very nuanced process. We're going to talk about some of the details. Hotels are our safety net. Hotels are our safety net, and they have taken care of a lot of people. 7,996 people, in fact, as of today, across 40 hotels on Maui are getting shelter, are getting care. Over time, that will change. We will move people to longer-term rentals in different circumstances that suit their lives better. But I wanted you to know about that. Some key dates. I told you about 9/25. That's the reentry date where people could, in some cases, go back to their properties if they've been cleared. Then there's the 9/29 date. That's a date where that was the safe harbor date. But I don't want people to be confused. We still will continue to care for them. That's when there were kind of fewer questions that were asked. Everyone in the urgency of the moment would at least get to that point. And then another date, 10/8, when we allow for the reopening more formally of West Maui. There's nothing magic to that except that it was 2 months from when the fire occurred, and we have to just begin to heal. We expect very few travelers overall to West Maui in that time, but I know it causes some concern. So that was what I wanted to first share. Next slide. We have formed a joint housing task force that's dealing with all these details. A lot of people get together, whether it's people from Department of Human Services or my DBED team, our coordinators. We coordinate with the private sector also because they're going to help us pay for a lot of this, and the humanitarian sector. So a lot of input here. That's the dates I unpacked for you. And also people, if they go to the HHFDC Fire Relief Housing Program, we already had, I believe it was maybe 700 people stepped up and said they would be willing to rent their house or their condo. So these are the kind of programs that will produce a lot of housing for people going forward. Again, it's going to be a little bumpy, but we're going to care for people, and it's going to be a big lift because, as you see, it's at least 8,000 people that have to be rehoused and helped. Next slide. How do we get people enough resources to survive? Well, there's been a lot of discussion about this. There's a program called TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Family. I have my Director of Human Services to talk more about this. We have a lot of money in that fund, and it's for temporary needs. She'll unpack that further, but we intend, and this is where I said we're going to go up to $100 million off the bat. We intend to make those monies available to the many thousands of families that have lost everything. I think there's at least 3,000 families that are in pretty deep trouble, and that would produce a pretty large check. If you do the math, you could see it's about $30,000, but we're not sure yet what that final number will be. We're working that out with TANF. But that, combined with what Philanthropy can do, means that we can produce a lot of resources so people can get first and last, or they can buy clothing for their kids. That's very important. In addition to that, you're going to hear about DSNAP, which is Disaster Supplement Assistance. That's food, and Cathy will unpack that for you too. Next slide. So again, here you go. We're welcoming visitors back to our state. Why? Because we learned the lesson in COVID. If you're not clear about when people can come back, if you're not clear about when you open, the mainland and the world don't understand. They don't understand the difference between one island or another. They don't understand the difference between West Maui or Kihei. Again, we're going to be very compassionate to those who have lost their homes. We're going to make sure that they have spaces to stay and not get displaced. But we have to start. And so I think October will be a very slow month, which it is automatically in Hawaii. And I think by the time we get to Thanksgiving and Christmas, people will be grateful that we have enough revenue to keep them in their jobs, pay for the school we have to build, pay for their services, and take care of people. So that's a big date. That's your date there. And you'll see that that will speed our recovery for those who have suffered so much. So I wanted to make that point. That might be the last of my slides. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's it. So again, we're offering a lot of options. You're going to hear about our relationship with Expedia, VRBO over time. We've had a lot of great support from Airbnb. There's been 1,400 people already on the Airbnb platform that are getting housed, and they're getting it for free. They offered a second month for free. We're shifting, we're transitioning, and that is pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. There'll be lots of time for other questions in a moment, but why don't I give it over to my experts now? Okay.
Mahalo, Governor Green. Next, please welcome Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism Director Jimmy Tokioka.
Good morning and aloha. You know, being here today, as I go to Maui over the past few weeks, it really strikes us really, really hard for the people that are suffering there. And we are doing everything night and day to make sure that we communicate as much as we possibly can and to help the county and the survivors on Maui, because it is tragic when you see the devastation on Maui, and I'm sure many of you in the media have seen it. So on behalf of the Governor's Joint Housing Task Force, mahalo for allowing me to update you on the housing efforts for the Lahaina wildfires and the temporary housing transitions. We want to extend our gratitude to our partners at the Department of Human Services. Cathy and Joe have been great partners as we transitioned survivors from the congregate shelters to the non-congregate shelters. And, you know, we have had a lot of partners with Red Cross, with FEMA, HAIMA, and thank you all for the contributions that you've made to make this possible. In speaking to the Red Cross people that have come from all over the country, we moved in the first 2 weeks 5,000 people from congregate shelters into hotels. According to the Red Cross, that's never been done before in the places that they service across the country for all of the different disasters that they service. So it was a big, heavy lift from our department, myself and Luke Myers at the convention center. We set up a communications room there where we could communicate directly with the Red Cross, with FEMA, with HAIMA, with now HUD, with SBA, because being in the same room helps us communicate, and it's worked out really, really well. I'd also like to recognize the hotels, vacation rentals, Airbnbs, and timeshares who have been housing the 8,000 shelter survivors and hotel employees, many of which are survivors themselves. I would also note that the ILWU, the union that many of the hotel union workers are affiliated with, have 2,700 employees that work in West Maui. Of those 2,700 employees, 1,500 were directly affected by the fires, and so when we're there, they certainly reach out to us and want to make sure that we understand their plea, that they want some normalcy and they want to continue to be communicated with and to be communicated and assisted with as we move forward. So to that end, we're in constant communications. In addition to that, Hawaii Finance Development Corporation, which is part of DBED, created a Hawaii Fire Relief Housing Program, which has more than 1,300 property listings and has over 300 families that have been placed to this date. So for that information, I think one of the slides is that we're going to put up is the Hawaii the Hawaii Fire Relief Program, which we're pleading to homeowners and unit owners that if you have additional units, please put them into this program, because we need as many programs as we possibly can to move people from the hotels into shelters, into more comfortable shelters like Airbnb, like a vacation rental, places that have a kitchen. Just a simple fact of a regular refrigerator and a stove. These are the types of accommodations that we're looking to house our survivors, and we will not stop until we get to that end. Moving forward, we are working with these associations to provide these rooms, and in the meantime, we want everyone out there to know that we do not condone properties that are asking survivors, including their own hotel employees, to leave without another housing solution in place. So we want to make that clear. We want to make sure that every single survivor has an opportunity, wherever that may be, for shelter, during this time period. We went out of our way as a team at DBED and through the governor's office to provide a premium daily rate. FEMA was incredible during this time. So we're asking for your assistance as we move forward, because FEMA, Bob Fenton stepped up in a huge way with his team, and certainly the governor and DBED appreciate all of the efforts that Bob worked towards. Again, we want to thank our federal and state and county partners, our community partners for making this happen, and myself at DBED and our team want to make sure that we can be the conduit connecting the state resources with everyone in the community. As for business recovery, the state transferred $12.5 million on September 12th to the Maui County to support businesses that were impacted. The details of those funds are being finalized, and it's complicated because we want to make sure that the money stays on Maui. It's not easy to make sure that all of these businesses are registered with whichever entity we move with, but it's not as easy as you can imagine getting money to many of these businesses who have lost everything. And we are very cognizant of that, and the governor wants to make sure that we help them to the best of our ability. So when those requirements for the funds are publicized, we will let people know at that point, and we'll continue to update everyone on the progress that we've done with that program. So mahalo and aloha for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Mahalo, Director Tokioka. Moving forward, I'd like to welcome Department of Human Services Director Cathy Betts.
Good morning and aloha. Thanks for having me here today to share some updates from the Department of Human Services. I would like to reiterate Director Tokioka's comment that everyone in this room, our state, community, and federal partners have been working around the clock to ensure in an intentional and thoughtful way that we get resources to those most in need on Maui. I'm going to provide a few updates for the Department of Human Services today, some ongoing programs that we launched very quickly in the first few weeks after the fires, and as well as the TANF program that Governor mentioned. We've been working closely with the U.S. Food and Nutrition Service, FNS, for waivers to support survivors on Maui. One example is a statewide waiver to allow SNAP to be used for hot meals purchased from retailers through October 14th, 2023. This is important because we have many families without kitchens, and they may lack the ability to cook and prepare their own food for their families. We also launched on Monday Disaster SNAP that Governor referenced as well. DSNAP is a one-time food benefit for households living or working in Kula or Lahaina who are directly impacted due to loss of housing, loss of employment, and food loss. DSNAP is only for households who don't currently receive SNAP. Current SNAP households in Lahaina and Kula were automatically issued a supplemental benefit on September 20th and don't need to apply separately for DSNAP. We have application sites that are launched statewide. The Maui location is at the Hyatt Regency and is open through Saturday, September 23rd from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I want to mention just a huge mahalo to our DHS team on the ground. By midweek, we received over 1,000 applications from impacted survivors. I also want to stress that interpreters are on site and materials have been translated. Finally, I want to mention the TANF non-recurring short-term or NRST program. We worked quickly and collaboratively with community-based organizations in Maui who know their community's needs best to launch the TANF program for families impacted by the disaster. We're working quickly to finalize the application process and eligibility requirements for a program that will utilize, as Governor referenced earlier, up to $100 million in support for Maui wildfire survivors. TANF funds may be used to help families with dependent children with up to 4 months of housing, utilities, and transportation costs to assist with one-time purchase of clothing and school supplies. I want to stress that this program is separate from our regular ongoing TANF public assistance program that provides ongoing monthly benefits for families. Finally, I just want to thank our DHS team for really rolling up their sleeves and working around the clock to ensure these survivors' needs are met in a timely and trauma-informed way. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Director Betts. Next, please welcome the American Red Cross Deputy Coordinating Officer, Adam Runkle.
Good morning and aloha. The Red Cross continues to work 24/7 with amazing partners to make sure that people have the support that they need. Our primary focus at this time is the continued care for nearly 8,000 people who are in hotels. That is about 78% of the pre-disaster population of Lahaina. This support includes making sure that every family in our care has 3 nutritious meals per day, health and mental health services, and access to recovery resources along with daily essentials. The care that we're providing through our non-congregate sheltering program, also called NCS, will continue until all survivors have appropriate and comfortable housing solutions. All survivors in our NCS care who resided in Maui before the disaster and whose primary home was made uninhabitable by the wildfires will continue to receive shelter and will not be impacted by the end of the safe harbor period on September 29th. For those of you who are worried due to your citizenship status, let me reassure you. The American Red Cross is not a governmental organization. That allows us to be able to provide our care to everyone in need, regardless of citizenship status. Furthermore, we do not allow survivor information to be shared with immigration authorities. I would also like to reassure those in our sheltering care who are nervous in regards to the October 8th reopening of West Maui. That date has no bearing on continued non-congregate sheltering services. And at this time, the availability of hotel rooms is not a limiting factor in our ability to provide shelter and other services. Red Cross workers are also available every day to help answer questions and to reassure those who may be anxious about their ability to remain in the program. We also have a website, redcross.org/HIHelp, where survivors can find additional information, and they can also set up a time to speak directly with a Red Cross representative. I would also like to share that since August 8th, the Red Cross in Hawaii has distributed over $10 million in direct, immediate financial aid. That assistance has reached over 4,100 families, representing more than 9,800 individuals, and we're not done yet. Our shelter resident transition program will be providing additional financial assistance to families in our NCS care in the weeks and months ahead. These funds will be tailored to meet specific recovery gaps that families may have, such as a need for rental assistance or transportation. And that will help them secure longer-term housing solutions. Another phase of financial assistance will be open later in the fall, and that will be for those who resided in Maui prior to the disaster and whose homes were made uninhabitable. And we'll share full details along with information on how to apply in the coming weeks. To close, the American Red Cross is working around the clock to deliver our compassionate care to everybody in need. We're here for you. We're going to be here. We're not going anywhere. If you need help and we haven't been in touch, please call us. Our number is 1-800-RED-CROSS, or you can go online to redcross.org/HIHelp. Mahalo for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Mahalo, Adam. Finally, I'd like to introduce Hawaii Community Foundation CEO and President Micah Kāne.
Aloha mai kako. Over the past 40 days, just over $120 million has been raised from over 200,000 donors across the world, representing 50 plus countries. Nearly 25 million has been either appropriated or is in the pipeline to more than 100 community organizations throughout the state supporting Maui County. We're definitely moving right now from a rapid response mode to a stabilization and recovery phase. And what that really means is that we're looking for deeper, bigger, broader impacts and investments in our community, and trying to work hard to leverage our federal, state, and county partners, because philanthropy can never take the place of government. What that means is investments in temporary housing, investments in temporary schools, investments in temporary transportation, investments in temporary healthcare services, all things that hope to create this interim new normal that the people of Maui should expect and from this team of leaders here. You know, each of these buckets, there's federal, state, and county funding that philanthropy looks to leverage. We want to either be the first in or the last out and be leveraging on the back end to make use of those federal dollars in the most efficient way. We have a little more than $90 million remaining, and if you look at the number that the governor put up on screen of 15,000 people, you know, you're looking at just about $6,000 per person and place. It's not a lot of money when you look at the 2, 3, 4 year journey that we're going to be on. I think, you know, having been through, this is our 4th disaster as a community foundation, and there's a lot of elements that kind of reoccur in this transition period that I wanted to speak to, and it's this feeling of dysfunction, and it's this feeling of, you know, the outside looking in and saying, you know, I see a lot of dysfunction, and that's a natural thing that occurs at this time of a disaster. I think the trick is to really shrink down that period as much as we can, because it's just a natural evolution that occurs. Every disaster is different. This one is extremely complex. I have a lot of empathy for our government leaders right now who have to deal with that. You have half of the population that wants to be told what are they going to do and what are you going to do. You have half of the population saying, I want input on what you should do. And balancing that is a very, very difficult thing to determine. We're leaning a lot on Mayor Bisson's community outreach that is occurring right now. We're leaning a lot on our community partners in the community to give us that feedback, to understand really where community wants to go. As early as yesterday, we had a great meeting with County of Maui and Department of Human Services around this interim housing component, which Red Cross and HCF and CNHA and other organizations are partnering, and there was a lot of grinding in there. And you just got to go through it, and it's conversations that the public doesn't get to see. But hopefully what comes out of that is very clear options that community can get to choose. So we're in that, and I think that's a very important perspective for everyone to understand. And just in closing, I do want to thank the more than 200,000 people from across the world that have supported the Maui Strong Fund and those ambassadors that have advocated for it. I'd also like to thank the HCF staff for their time, as well as the community organizations that are on the ground every day, dealing with this issue. It's as much as traumatic for those that's been impacted as those trying to be at the front line. So really thank you for this opportunity to express our participation in this effort. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Micah. Now we will open up the floor to questions from media. Please raise your hand and await my acknowledgement, at which time you will be asked to state your name and news organization before proceeding with asking your question. In the spirit of allowing everyone in attendance the time to ask a question, we kindly ask for your kokua in raising one initial question per media outlet. You're welcome to ask additional questions after all media outlets have asked their first question. Mahalo nui, and with that, we will start with Jennifer, but can you restate your name and your news organization? So the general question is around the details surrounding the reentry into Lahaina/Maui.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the reentry period begins on Monday. This is mostly driven by the county, and I had a great conversation with Chief Oliveira. I still call him Chief, who is the MEMA director now. They're going to be as flexible as they can with people. They anticipate some people will only want to go for a very short period of time, a few minutes, to say goodbye, in a way, to their property. Others may want to stay several hours. They're going to be very accommodating. They will be providing a lot of protective gear, and they're also going to be mindful of the environment at the time. For example, if winds are very heavy or high and there's anything moving the ash around, they're going to be more careful. They're going to go methodically through a very large number of quadrants or zones, and I would actually defer to them for any more details than that. I think it's going to take several weeks at least for them to get through. Given the pace at which the EPA has gone through the properties, probably all will be cleared in a few short weeks, actually, for that phase. They anticipated it was going to be 3 months total to get through to a safe space. There's going to be, like I said earlier, some behavioral health support furnished by the state. We know that people will be grieving and suffering a great deal of despair when they see how little is left. Also, there are some locations where people did lose loved ones, as we know. So all of those are considerations, but they intend to do whatever necessary for people to get closure.
Any follow-up, Jennifer? Good? Follow-up, or are you good?
Will they have time limits?
I don't know that there'll be a formal time limit. There will definitely be capacity for several hours for people to go through. In a discussion last week, they did talk about having some support from county personnel professionals to help people sift through some of the ash. So there will be support there in general. I think some people will need to take several hours to have this first visit. This doesn't mean this will be the last time either, of course, that people will get back to their properties. It's still their property. But it will then go into the next phase, which is the larger removal of debris, which, by the way, when the Army Corps of Engineers does, they're going to stage that debris still in Hawaii for a significant amount of time so it doesn't go immediately to the mainland. So there'll be lots of opportunities for people to see if they find a lost ring or a picture, some other keepsake.
Okay. Next. Go for it.
This question is for the governor. Charles Nahale had his family compound burned on Front Street, and he wanted to know, should victim survivors be forced to move in order for incoming tourists to come in on October 8th?
The question is around, should survivors be forced to move for tourists on October 8th?
Yeah. I think I was very clear in our opening that the answer is no. We don't think anyone will need to be moved, forced to be moved. There is a counter narrative that we should not open up for several years. That's not possible. But we won't displace individuals who are currently in hotels or other Airbnbs or other housing to accommodate anyone. Like I said, we don't anticipate a large number of people coming, but we also didn't want the many people who asked us to open up have to relocate themselves. About 85% of the people that we spoke to asked us to open up almost immediately so that they could keep their jobs. Others will feel differently, and we're not going to pressure them to go back to work or to do anything of the sort. But we do know that recovery has to begin. But in his case, Charles and his family will still be housed. We'll make sure that happens.
At this point, Mr. Nahale says that he's been given options, but those options have not become available. So what can you say to him?
I think that was covered at least 3 times earlier, that we have our Human Services Department, we have the Red Cross, we have the hotels themselves, making sure that there are either ways that they stay in the same hotel if they were workers, for example, at that hotel, or other alternatives, which are now, for lack of a better word, under consideration. Right now, what we do is FEMA goes out and they put what's called an RFP, a request for proposal, out very broadly to see who would like to apply to have their properties be a part of this. We also have hundreds of Airbnbs, and then also the program for HHFDC. So people are traumatized, and when they see stuff on the internet, they get afraid. But we're not pushing people out. And if anyone does get displaced or it's suggested that they're going to get displaced, as you heard, the Red Cross or our office or others will intervene directly to make sure that they have a roof over their head.
Okay, mahalo mahe. I'll go here.
For Governor. Oh, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki.
For Governor. But is it possible to put a moratorium on short-term rentals like you did during COVID for the West Maui specific area, just so we have enough housing for everybody for the long term?
The question is around the possibility of putting moratoriums on short-term rentals.
That's an excellent question. So the answer is yes, it is possible. I am considering that if in some circumstance we are unable to find enough housing for people in the region. We don't want to do that. If short-term rentals and others don't step up in large enough numbers, what we will do is we will likely make a significant offer well above the regular base rate of rentals to people to see if they'd like to become a part of a program significantly higher than, say, renting out a regular 2-bedroom apartment for the period of 18 months. That would be the plan. We're not keen on doing that right now because we think there'll be enough people that decide of their own accord that they'd like to participate in these programs. But I am reserving that as a possibility. So I implore people out there, please consider putting your unit into the rental pool so that we can give you secure rentals for these severely affected families for at least 18 months. Please do that. It'll make it easier for all of us. everyone has struggled and suffered so much, and there's been incredible generosity in this space, so I think we'll succeed. But we do have the breadth of several months that we can continue to use, like I said earlier, our safety net, which is the hotels, to care for, I think it's Charles' family and others.
Follow up, Mickey? You good?
Sure, I can give a little bit of time, but for those who aren't mentally ready to go back to work, I know unemployment benefits, if the boss asks you to come back, then you can lose your benefits if you refuse work. Is there going to be anything in place so if people aren't mentally ready to go, they don't?
So the question is around the October 8th opening and whether or not there will be services in place to help those that may not want to return to work.
Yeah, we intend to be generous and extend unemployment benefits longer if necessary. Also, being in a state of trauma, PTSD are completely legitimate reasons to not go back to work. And that is the case for many people. Although I was astounded how many people came to us who were workers in different hotels and different industries who asked very passionately that we start now, that we start opening up, because they felt that the likelihood of there being a chance to stay and continue to live in Hawaii was dependent on them not having their jobs taken away. And so, yes, there will be unemployment still available. We had over 15,000 new applications for unemployment on Maui alone because of the fire. And we know that some people can't go back because their business was on Front Street for a long time. But the many workers, and you heard those numbers from Chair Tokioka, there's a lot of people that are at hotels that want to get back there. Want to add to that?
Just add to that to say that we've been in lockstep with the ILWU, who has, like I said, the 2,700 employees. So we're getting our feedback directly from them on what moves we need to make to help their employees. 2,700 employees in an area like that, that's a big concentration of people working in those hotels. So we're getting guidance from them every step of the way. And Chris West and Dustin Dawson and Brendan Wolf have been very helpful, taking us on the ground, meeting people, talking to people. And so that's where we're getting our input from.
I will go here.
Can you just address, I know we can't control people's behavior, but there's a real concern about tourists coming in when they're allowed to, being disrespectful or maybe even intrusive, and that is a concern among the local people who are still grieving and emotions are high. Can you just address that and maybe what you're hoping to see when the reopening happens?
So the question is around addressing respectful tourism upon the 10/8 opening and what the governor would hope to see with regard to tourist behavior.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So, first of all, I expect people to be mindful in general of our needs that people travel with Aloha. No question about that. What it looks like for October and November are individuals traveling to Maui are very often people that have been here many times before, that have a long-standing relationship with the islands, that are well known to those hotels, and therefore they're the kind of travelers that have been able to absorb some of our culture and should be thoughtful. I can't control people's behavior, as has been evidenced by all kinds of interactions with people out in public. What I can say is the appeal I'm making to everyone is come and help us heal. And the only circumstance in which people should come to Maui in the course of these next couple months is if they feel that they can offer more resource and help us heal quicker, because Maui's going to be here forever. Hawaii's going to be here forever. But these intervening months, I think only the most dedicated and committed travelers will ultimately make that decision. People had to really soul search as to whether they would come back in the months of October, November, December this year. A lot of those individuals have been a part of not just Airbnbs that they're committed to, but like vacation rentals, some of the timeshares. Those people have been coming to Hawaii for many years, and I can't imagine they're going to suddenly become antagonistic to our local friends and families. here because the fire occurred. Actually, this is a time for people to come together, and I'll be making that appeal, as I have been nationally again this weekend. So I'll keep reiterating that. I don't think we're going to see that kind of conflict.
Go here.
Thanks, Chandler. So I believe Red Cross and DHS is kind of tied together. Adam, you had mentioned fears of immigration services trying to tell people we're not here to round you up and send you back. And Cathy, I think you had said interpreters are also something you're trying to provide. It sounds like there's a real concern that there's a group of people that are not getting access to services they need. I'm thinking in part the Micronesian population that is in Lahaina and around there. So it's kind of tied together. Immigration fears, if you can't talk to somebody in your own language and say I need help, and you're worried about being picked up, sounds like you're worried that there's people out there that aren't getting served.
So the question, Chad?
I don't know what the question is. The question is,
Sorry, I'll get to the question shortly.
The immigration fears, is there a real fear that there's people that are not getting service?
Got it. Noted. So the question is around, are there in fact real fears around an immigrant or immigrant population living in Lahaina and throughout Maui that may not be getting services? You're welcome.
And that is an excellent question. And yes, you are correct. We are concerned about that. And it's not just for those on Maui, but in the experience of the American Red Cross, we see that time and time again with disasters all across the country. And so what we want to make sure is that it is abundantly clear that our services, that the services from the American Red Cross, since we are a non-governmental agency, since we are a charity, we are allowed to provide all of our care and to everyone in need, regardless of citizenship status. And it's understandable why people who are concerned about their documentation status and so forth, those who are undocumented or individuals from compact nations, that they may be hesitant to come forward for assistance because oftentimes they may mistake the Red Cross for a governmental agency. We do seem somewhat official in some regards, but I want to again reassure everyone that our assistance is for all. And again, if you've been fearful, if you've been hesitant in coming forward, please call us, 1-800-RED-CROSS. We are here to help you. And just to reiterate to your point, any information that you share with us will stay with us. We're not going to pass that along to any immigration agencies.
Okay, now are there enough people that can speak not only Spanish, Tagalog, Ilocano, the sign, but Trapeze, Marshallese, and so forth?
Yes, we are working very closely with many different community agencies, along with DHS, to identify those who are able to interpret out in the community. Also, language is one of the factors, but also ensuring that we are partnering with trusted community leaders in that space as well to just increase the comfort level in working and reaching out to the Red Cross for assistance and ensuring that all of our programs, whether it be enrollment into non-congregate sheltering, whether it be enrollment for financial assistance, that those are all fully accessible and understandable to those who are in need.
There's a little addition there too. So for those who are COFA individuals, we do have an additional capacity through what's called TANOF, other financing. Right now, $5 million, I believe, was where we're targeting. So there are similar resources that are not that unlike TANF, but for individuals that fall into that category. Again, Cathy has to be very diligent because the federal government's mindful about how we use those kind of monies. We have a lot of them, but we have a lot of struggling post-COVID. I think I read in Civil Beat today about the post-COVID era of poverty, and that is very relevant. It's a good article, and it is relevant to what we're trying to do. Yeah.
That's a good question, Chad. Thank you for asking it. I think that we have to hold these communities central to recovery. We understand that it is a large population of immigrants, especially Filipino immigrants. As a daughter of a Filipino immigrant, I've been on the ground and spoken with survivors and seen the impact that it has critically had on this community. So we hold language access. We know that language access is important, but it has to be core at all of the services we provide. We have to have interpretation. We have to have language access. We also have to have culturally responsive community groups that are our partners on the ground who can make that warm handoff for services. So we've been working really closely with our community groups on Maui. We've been at the community fairs. We've had MedQuest there, signing people up for health insurance coverage who may have lost it through loss of employment. We've also had our SNAP folks there, as well as Governor referenced, the temporary assistance for other needy families, which, we're one of the only states in the nation that has a state-funded program for folks who are mixed citizenship or folks from compact nations that may not be able to access federal funds. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Good? I think you had one more? Yeah, we're good. Another round.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Governor, I know you've talked about how people won't be displaced from their accommodations to make room for tourists. But you also talked about how there's a need to get people into more comfortable accommodations, places with kitchens, etc. But I talked to some Ilocano housekeepers who are staying at the hotels where they work, and they have anxiety about moving again. And for the folks who might prefer the accommodations that they have, with October being a slower month for tourism, will they be allowed if that's where they prefer to stay?
Got it. So the question is around clarification, notably for workers, hotel employees who are temporarily being sheltered at hotels who may prefer to stay at the hotels in which they work versus alternative accommodations.
Yeah, again, people have gone through so much. We're going to try to help manage their trauma. And so to the extent that we can, we'll try to move people as little as possible and keep them in a space that they feel safe in. Over time, everyone's going to move out of hotels over some period of time. And so we will leave that to our housing committee. I can have them, again, weigh in. For, I think, a significant period of time, there's going to be a lot of space. And so I don't want people to worry too much. But we're still going to err on the side of protecting our people rather than tourism. It has to be said, they go hand in hand. If we don't have enough tourism, we don't have enough services for people to have school or food sources. As Micah said very eloquently to me a few times, you have a lot of needs and they keep going on. They don't just end after a couple months. You have to save some monies for later. And we're trying to make sure we smoothly go from this traumatic phase to a place where people have begun to heal and then definitely move into houses. We haven't even talked yet about building. And I think that's in a way good because I think that's pretty far out. We have to hear from the people of Lahaina. We have to hear from FEMA what they think we should build for kind of bridge housing. Right now, next couple months, we'll slowly move people into spaces that are actually much more suitable for large families. I don't know how many times we'll have to say it, but we'll keep reiterating it. And if there are examples where someone feels too much pressure, they'll reach out to us and we will settle that down.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned slightly in my comments, we are working with every single hotel that has taken in shelter survivors. Many of these hotels, as you can imagine, that was the first place of refuge that the employees went to. They went to the place that they worked, if it was a timeshare, vacation rental, or a hotel. And many of them took them in and housed them. And, Red Cross knows that because we sent the Red Cross to many of these properties that weren't able to connect with the Red Cross, didn't have the cell service and all of that. So we have communicated with them that if their employees want to stay at those properties, then we're encouraging them to take their employees and keep them there. We hear the same thing that you're hearing. We're also hearing that some of the employees have bigger families and they want a different unit. They've appreciated the fact that the hotels took them in. And when they took them in, they had no assurance that they were going to get paid for that time. And in the first few days, it wasn't part of the contract that they were going to get paid, but they took them in. So I will say that, I said this before, the Royal Lahaina and the Outrigger Kaanapali Beach did it without a contract until the Red Cross got there. So it was, a lot of coordination and a lot of goodwill from these hotel properties. So we're, in constant contact with them. Most of my time during the day is trying to figure out where these next moves are because, we can't just take over the property. But as the governor said, there's an option that's out there that we don't want to use, and hopefully we can find places for the shelter survivors, especially all of them, but the employees, hopefully they can stay at those properties. I do want to say, to answer part of Nikki's question, is when the fire happened and reservations were being canceled, we did surveys with the hotels and people that canceled and asked them why they canceled, if they were going to come back. So a lot of the people they felt guilty. They know a lot of, as the governor said, they know a lot of the employees at the property. So they didn't want to be an inconvenience. Many of the surveys that came back were telling us that. But what they were also telling us is that they are coming back. They might pass on Maui this year, but as things get better, they do really want to come back. So that message is loud and clear. HTA also is putting out messaging from the local community on, what type of tourist or what type of visitor experience, we'd like to see during this time at Maui. And I learned yesterday, and I went to the site, MauiRecovers.org is an excellent site for all of us to use as a reference because, it is Maui's recovery team. We are here at the state and we are working with the county, but if you go to MauiRecovers.org, there's a lot of information there.
I'd just like to add a couple of additional comments from the Red Cross perspective. There will be a point where there may be some need for individuals in our NCS care to move to new hotel locations. However, I can assure those that would be moving that they still will have that ability to have a hotel room. It may just be in a different location. And we will also promise to communicate all of those changes and what the expectations may be as soon as possible, as soon as those plans do come together. In saying that, I want to acknowledge the fact and echo something that the governor said, in that that can be a difficult process for someone who's already experienced so much and has been in their new hotel accommodation for many weeks now, and maybe many more weeks before movements would need to occur. So we're going to do our absolute best to make sure that transition, should it need to occur for some families, is done in the most comfortable and the most supportive of ways as well. We do have shelter resident transition workers who are connecting with families in our care each and every day, and they are checking in on their safety, their well-being. They're also making sure they have access to daily essentials and so forth. But also part of those conversations is talking about what their stay looks like, and as we learn more about those potential movements, those SRT or shelter resident transition workers will be in very close contact with all of the families in the hotels.
Okay, final question here.
Yes, this one's for Jimmy, actually. Forgive me, I haven't checked the website in about a week, but what are the current numbers of people or visitors going into Maui, and then what is that outlook? I know October is historically slow.
So the question is around the current numbers as it relates to tourism on Maui, and then the outlook, the forecast.
Okay, I don't have the exact numbers, but what we did last week Friday, I talked to a lot of the hotels that in West Maui and timeshare units. And what they told me is when the governor made the announcement that Maui was going to open up on October 8th, it's not like people were putting in reservations off the hook. So they are trickling in is the word that they used. They also said what's more concerning is January, February, and March is down. So I think it goes back to the surveys that we took that, people may be passing on Maui, but, we knew from, the feedback we got from the hotels that their employees, the hotels and the employees, that, they wanted some kind of normalcy, and that was a big part of the decision to open. But again, Nikki, I can't give you the exact number, but the reservations are down. So I'm going to have another meeting with them later on next week, and we're going to be updating that information every single day, every single time we meet. but for now it's down, and many of them, and we as well, thought that that was going to be the situation.
Okay, good. So again, look, thank you. None of you asked about another topic, which I'll mention just briefly. That's long-term care for those who had the ultimate loss and support for their families. The goal of our administration is to, first and foremost, find some way to help people heal. And that means, as you heard in many different versions, giving people housing, giving people food, building a school. For those who lost a loved one, I spent some time this week in New York, across the country. I'll continue these conversations nationally to find a pathway to get a reserve of money for us to provide compensation to those families who suffered the ultimate loss, which is a lost loved one, or who were injured in the fire. This is meant to help people through the most tragic circumstance of a fire like this, and to in some way protect them against many years of litigation and having to wait. So I do intend to pursue that. I hope that everyone understands it's just meant to help people who suffered terribly. There will obviously be a lot of discussions. There will be litigation. There will be assessments of where we fell short, where we could have done better. That's the work of the Attorney General and any number of investigators. But for my part, we're going to do what we can to care for those who lost a loved one. And that will mean resources, financial resources. We'll do a lot of these things in the coming weeks and months. I plan to have some significant announcements on or around October 8th. It'll be the next major conversation that we have about those kind of issues. But please, make sure if you're out there, if you have need, if it affected your family, if you lost a loved one, make sure that someone either at Red Cross or FEMA has your contact information. Even send it to our governor's office or talk to the Maui police force so that we can make sure that whatever available resources we have get to you or your family. I'll pause there and just say mahalo to everybody from across the planet who's been so generous, and across Hawaii who's been so understanding about how this affects us all. We will get through this, even though it's going to be very gut-wrenching at times, but we'll care for our people. Aloha.
Mahalo. This formally concludes today's news conference, and just want to say thank you, everyone, for giving us your time and attention, and please continue to malama Maui. Mahalo nui.